Welcome to Shore Perspectives, a community feature of WESR Radio, highlighting the spirit of the shore from those who call it home.
Hi, I'm Cara Burton.
I'm McDaniel.
It's our project that we worked on. It's the Exmore Walking Tour. The genesis behind it was a promise to Robert Doerr, the town manager, after I had done a Nassauatics walking tour when I was working with the library, and prior to that, a Perksley walking tour. He said they needed one for Exmore, so I promised him we'd do one. So I didn't have time until last year after my retirement from the library, and Jim McDaniel got roped in.
I did a lot of the research at the courthouse on trying to figure out which properties were what back in the day when some of them were built, for what purpose. We went down a lot of rabbit holes, to say the least.
Tell me some of the buildings that you've researched and put into your walking tour.
Well, let's talk about the one we're in right now. Right now, it's Habitat Restore. So the current generation, that's what they'll remember it as. I remember it as Lloyd's Drug Store. And there are actually some folks around here who might remember it as the MAP Tourist Home. By the way, we're trying to find a photo of that, if anybody has one.
We'll happily take any old photos of Exmore before 1970. We've got a few, but not enough.
And that's not to keep. We just like scans of them, and we would certainly credit you. And so that's why we'd like to thank David Scanlon, Barry Mears, and some others that are credited in the tour that had numerous photos, or I should say at least some that we could use. But we're always searching for more, and this may be an ongoing project as more things are turned up.
We went back to the beginnings of Exmore in the 1880s when there was no Exmore. It was one of the stops on the railroad. Lots of speculation about why it's called Exmore. Some people say because it was the 10th stop on the railroad, which it isn't. But there's an Exmore in England somewhere, and that's presumably what it's named for. Once it was established as a railroad stop, land speculators, particularly is it John Chandler?
Right.
Bought lots of land around here, subdivided it, platted out the town, and started building things. His house is still here. It's let's see, what is it? Stop number
4.
Up above the road.
So one thing we might want to bring up, and we're not going to go into detail because we want you to do the tour, is the improved Order of the Redmen. That people have never heard of that. There were quite a number of those tribe fraternal organizations on the shore, so we did a little side research in those. And then there was also a synagogue here. We don't have a lot of evidence of it, but we do have a couple clippings. We're still trying to find out exactly where it was, though we think it is in one of the buildings that's on the tour. There was one in Cape Charles, but there were actually enough Jewish businessmen here.
Men. You have to have 10 men to have a minyan, which is a prayer service in Judaism.
And there were enough of them because there were a lot of merchants that came down along with the railroad business. And so people might remember like Glick's department store, the Glick family. So
Flax's,
yeah.
FLAX, the Benjamins. Benjamins is still here. It was Peebles when I came here, but it was several other things in between.
Go to the new Exmore visitors webpage, visitexmore.com. And there's also in the town hall a page that has a QR code. You will see a lot of those being used now by museums and on these walking tours because we try not to print a lot of paper. We encourage you to do it in the order because we wrote it to tell a story.
Starts at the town hall, which was not the town hall. It used to be the People's Bank, also known as Sully Arnold's Bank, because he was apparently the driving force behind that. But the town office has been there for decades. There were other things there in the past that we found. There are a number of pre-1900 buildings still standing in Exmore. Mr. Chandler's house is one of them. We think the small storefront that says Rancho Relaxa was also pre-1900, although as the Henry Louis Gates would say on Finding Your Roots, the paper trail ran out. We traced that one back to the early 20s when there was a clothing store and a children's shop.
So anybody who grew up around here, remember Exmore was a hoppin' town. And even before that, it was a really hoppin' town. There was a lot going on here. Like I said, it had 2 hotels, had a lot of businesses. It had people coming from all over, including a president arriving in Exmore. So this was a real hub because they would go down to Willis Wharf, which was actually used to be called Downing's Wharf. Some people don't know that. So one of people we interviewed was Jerry Dowdy, who happened to be my middle school history teacher, but he's one of the local experts on Willis Wharf. And he talked about how Willis Wharf used to have different names. One of them was Downing's Wharf, but that actually has a tie-in to this building we're sitting in because the Mapp family that owned the tourist home was actually related to the Downings, Arthur Downings, which is connected to Chatham. So if you go to the Exmore Town website, not the visitor one, but the Town of Exmore site, there's an article in there about Downingsville, which is what this area was called, and apparently there was a Downingsville plantation. I'd like to talk about tours and why to do them. Not only are they a healthy way to get out and exercise, but it's a great thing to do with your family. It's the driving tours are wonderful for people that have accessibility issues, but also the town walking tours as well, because usually those are physically accessible, whereas sometimes the little museums may not be. So that's one part, was just getting out. Another part we touched on is preserving the histories of the towns. It's also a way to get people talking about it and do a community collection of the information and combine it into a story instead of having it piecemeal all over the place. Not to mention, it's a great way for tourism to be promoted on the shore. Heritage tourism ranks high with Eastern Shore of Virginia visitors, and this was a great way to help support those. It's a great way to learn about where you live, or a place to learn about where you're visiting, but I love it for people to learn about where they live. What was that building over there? Why is that street called that? Why is there a cemetery in that person's yard? Those type of stories. So there's a lot to learn, and we encourage everybody to visit your local towns. Most all of the towns now on the shore have its own walking tour.
The town of Exmore is working on window signs for the stops on the tour with a bit of history about that building. So if somebody just walks by, they can see it without having to have the app on their phone. The other thing, since we're sitting in Lloyd's Old Lloyd, as I always used to call him, drugstore, we talked to him at some length before he passed on. We talked to a lot of the older people we could find in Exmore who remembered things. There were interesting discussions about, for instance, where was the A&P? In my era, it's where Community Service Board was. In one era, it was across the road from here. Seashore Eye Care is located. That was also a furniture store at one time and a clothing store at one time. The stores moved around depending on where they could rent and size requirements and whatnot. It's a fascinating history, and some of it we've documented with photographs. Some of it's just so-and-so says.
Change always happens, and that's what you learn about history. There was a lot of change. I mean, you think back in the 1880s when this railroad came here, and all the new people that came into town and started doing things. So that's just a part of life. And so we hope that when people read these trails and walk them and walk in the steps of their ancestors, that they can appreciate all the hard work everybody went into to make this a great place to live.
For Shore Perspectives and WESR Radio, I'm Kelley Gaskell.